Good morning, everybody. I'll be brief. My name is Mike Frank, and I'm the director of the Washington, D.C. office for the Hoover Institution, and we're excited to have you here as our guest today, and our esteemed honored guest, Senator Orrin Hatch. Quick introduction, and then we'll turn it over to the senator. With over 4 decades of public service, 42 years to be exact, Senator Orrin Hatch is regarded as one of the most effective and consequential legislators of modern times. One example, since he first came to Congress in 1977, no legislator has sponsored more bills that have become law than Senator Hatch. Currently, he's the most senior Republican in the Senate, serving as the President pro tem, which he also has a security detail here to prove that. And he's now currently chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Previously, he served as chairman of both Judiciary and what's known as the HELP Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And during his tenure, if you think about it, he's going to talk about foreign policy today. Senator Hatch has witnessed and played a role in many world-changing events. And just a couple examples, the last decade plus of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the emergence of communist China into an economic superpower, among other things, the formation and the ongoing travails of the European Union, the post-Cold War unipolar moment where the U.S. stood alone as the world's unquestioned superpower, and the many challenges to that supremacy since. And finally, among other things, the rise of Islamism throughout the Middle East and the consequences that has held for the rest of the world. So with that kind of context and that experience, we're going to invite Senator Hatch up to the podium to share his thoughts with us and his reflections on his time in the U.S. Senate.
Well, thank you so much. It's always a privilege to do anything with the Hoover Institution. It's what a great organization with great leadership. So I'm very grateful to be with you. It's an honor to be with you today. Now, I wish to express my deep gratitude to the Hoover Institution, to its esteemed director, Thomas Gilligan, Michael Frank, and to the distinguished members of the institution's Board of Overseers and the whole research community. In a little over a month, I will retire from the Senate after 42 years of service, the longest serving Republican in history. Among the countless unenforceable experiences I've had or unforgettable experiences I've had as a senator, few compare to the opportunities I had to shape our nation's foreign policy. As many of you know, I've been on the front lines of some of the biggest moments in international politics of the last half century. Today, I want to share some of the lessons I learned along the way with you. Just last month, I visited Croatia, a country whose independence I worked hard to realize, and a region I worked hard to secure in the lead up to the Dayton Accords. It was also my third visit to Europe over the past year to advance our bilateral relations with our European allies. Indeed, even in the final year of my service here, my commitment to America's standing in the world is less intense than it was during my early years when I helped transfer Stinger post missiles to the Afghans, which really brought about the end of that war. A lot of people don't realize that that was what really did it, and I was the one who did that. That's when the Soviets advanced in Central Asia or when I fought alongside President Reagan to establish a national endowment for democracy. A lot of people don't realize I was the sponsor of that. These milestones took place during historic turns in world history, the height of the Cold War, our efforts to continue protecting the liberal international order, and our efforts to secure America and the free world during the War on Terror. It spanned seven presidential administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and the transformation of the media and information landscapes. I mention these highlights to underscore just how much our history impacts who we are and where I believe we're headed. Through our actions in the present, we create our history. So we must recognize opportunities for doing good when we see them and confidently pursue the correct course. We have a duty to learn about our past, about the sacrifices made, the directions taken, the costs and rewards at stake. The study of history is not a mere academic exercise. It is foundational to understanding who we are. Our history does not remain in the past. It lives in the present, offering endless lessons for the challenges we have before us. If we ignore history, we risk forgetting a fundamental truth that freedom is fatefully fragile, and we must defend it at every turn. In my 42 years of service, I've gained an appreciation for the fact that our history is so much more than memorizing statistics such as names, dates, and places. Rather, it is about the stories told, the lives lived, the sacrifices made to preserve the principles we stand for. The most important lesson of world history in the 20th century is that if America does not rise to the task, no one else will. After World War II, America's grace in the wake of victory was unprecedented. That America and its allies chose to embrace and even salvage the country we had recently fought was an ironic turn. It was not only a diplomatic challenge, but a moral one. None captured the moral sentiment better than Chancellor Adenauer, who responded to President Kennedy's remarks concerning the bonds between the United States and Germany with the following words, quote, "I feel you should try to imagine what it means for a vanquished nation after such a murderous fight and war to see the victor extend the helpful hand to the vanquished. It was not only the material aid and assistance, but it was above all the human attitude, the human aspect, the human spirit in which this was done, which established these inseparable bonds between our two countries," unquote. These words describe not only a particular history, but also the visceral sentiment within which that history was made. That America and Germany share such history comes from our understanding of lessons learned from what a whole generation experienced. Their realization of the lowest depths that humanity can reach, and the collective commitment to protecting the world from ever repeating such horrors. Chancellor Adenauer's remarks point to the ways in which historical moments can define how we appreciate our principles, the principles that Americans hold dear, including the protection of basic human liberties, democratic institutions, open elections, and free market competition, have endured the test of time, not merely because they are noble in their own right, but rather because they are strong and resilient enough to survive. The key feature of international relations is the challenge of working with states and actors that do not always share the same principles or the same outlook. Indeed, the most trying of cases require finding a way forward with those who overtly oppose the principles you stand for. In some cases, having nothing but hostility towards you. Statesmanship is tested precisely within these settings. It begins with an historical appreciation of the principles we stand for and how best to apply these principles in overcoming today's challenges. Properly applying our past requires a different focus on parsing out how our nation came to be. Without U.S. leadership, post-war European reconstruction never would have taken place. Soviet communism never would have been defeated, and the economic growth and prosperity that our country has come to expect never would have occurred. The existing American-led global order certainly did not ensue from a reluctance to engage internationally or commercially. It also did not come from a single moment of engagement. Rather, the fact that we have had a stable and open global order for more than 70 years is largely because America has remained critically present and involved in advancing its leadership responsibilities abroad, which ultimately helps the nation flourish at home. That's an important point. I'm concerned that U.S. disengagement from the world, particularly when it comes to security and trade, could result in a more unstable and less open world. On the home front, protectionism and economic nationalism will lead to a less robust economy and fray international relationships, especially with our allies, that jeopardize American security. The risk of American retreat from global leadership must not be ignored. This requires moving away from excessively ideological, tribal, or partisan postures, a task that is not always comfortable to accept. Two observations here become immediately clear. First, rarely has the road been a straight one in achieving a set objective. Local conditions and realities confront us, and we naturally cannot operate effectively without working through them. The second is that rarely are parallels precise between the challenges of the past and those of today. The past, in other words, cannot predict how we should behave in the face of new challenges, but it should prepare us with the knowledge of where the potential for results might lie. From these two observations, there is a universal lesson that comes to all who build a relationship with history. In the end, even the best of historians cannot know every last detail of how a story unfolded, every turn of the dime, every exact cause and effect. But this is not cause for despair. Rather, it is an invitation to honesty and hard work. And while we may not always know precisely how or when our actions might lead to particular results, we cannot shirk the responsibility of doing everything we can to achieve what is right. The first step in this honest approach is knowing when to leave ideology, tribalism, and partisanship at the door, inviting partners when they present themselves, and committing to a principled pragmatism. Standing by principles is necessary, but insufficient. Only an approach that is both collaborative and creative can yield the desired outcome. Much as with the episodes of the Berlin airlift and the Marshall Plan, we win over more partners to our ideas when we convince them through what those ideas achieve. Unfortunately, the caliber of creativity and courage required to learn from our past is in rare supply today. Domestically, we've become far too comfortable in our political bubbles and media digests. In the process, we have forgotten that those of different political persuasions can be our intellectual sparring partners and collaborators, not our enemies. The root cause is our historical view of our principles, detached from the stories within which they were tested, trapped in hyperboles and ideological boxes. This prevents political leaders from doing meaningful work, just as it prevents the public from fully understanding the work their representatives are doing on their behalf. Sometimes issues cannot and should not belong neatly into any one political category. Sometimes getting it right simply means doing what's right. This lesson should be applied to our foreign policy as well. When the objective of doing the right thing is in plain sight, we as leaders need to be extra careful not to blind ourselves by ideological or partisan persuasions. I was able to get the right thing done recently when I helped secure the freedom of my constituent and his wife Josh and Tammy Holt from a jail in Venezuela where they had been captive for nearly 2 years. The key was a clear focus on the objective, freeing one of our own and being open to exploring opportunities that would lead us to that particular objective. My goal was to leave no stone unturned. This meant reaching out to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, corresponding with him, speaking with him, and meeting with his representatives in Washington when few of my colleagues were ready to do so. My objective was not to argue that one or another policy on Venezuela was right or wrong. Rather, it was to look squarely at where there might be possibilities. It was not the offer of a promise, but an acknowledgement of a potential. I believe it was this tone of principled but open outreach that encouraged an opportunity originally disguised as an intractable problem. Similarly, getting it right sometimes means disagreeing with one's own leadership. It's no secret that I staunchly support President Trump. I not only supported him as a candidate, but as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. And that hasn't always been easy, by the way. I led the charge in passing tax reform, arguably the president's most signature legislative accomplishment to date. America's tax system was in desperate need of repair and sensible reform, and I was grateful to work with the president to get the job done. But I also support free markets and free trade, and will passionately continue to do so, whether it was leading the fight in Congress to enact bipartisan trade promotion authority, which helps open markets for U.S. exports, or authoring legislation to strengthen intellectual property rights in trade agreements. I have been at the forefront of advancing a pro-market strategy. History makes clear that protectionism corrodes our economy and global standing. Our nation has long maintained an open market to foreign imports and foreign capital while promoting freer trade and capital flows abroad. America did not become the world's leading economy by chance. Much of the reason was the deliberative result of an economic agenda that embraced freer markets and freer trade, setting the stage for the expansion of individual freedom, shared prosperity, and of course global peace. Our nation must never lose sight of the values, policies, and institutions which have wrought our peoples such immense progress. America can ill afford a lurch back to protectionism, globalization, and economic decline. I am confident that our nation's leaders will ultimately do the right thing by resisting protectionism and promoting free markets and free trade. And even though I will be retiring from the Senate, I will not stop fighting for issues and country, certainly the country that I care about. I know well that the need for American leadership in the world has never been greater. In my regular meetings with world leaders, and I meet with them almost daily, I am regularly moved by the sentiment that other nations want closer, deeper ties with our United States. Much, I believe, has to do with the fact that America offers a unique spark to cultivate a human spirit in engaging with the world. Now, we need to look back in order to move forward. Only by looking at the past or to the past can we bring clarity to the challenges of the present. One can and should ask sincere questions of why we pursue certain policies and what immediate and enduring outcomes they might produce. Often this line of reasoning brings us outside of our ideological comfort zones, but it is precisely in those zones of discomfort that honest conversations can take place, and it is these conversations that can produce the most breathtaking results. I saw that in many ways with my staffer at the time, Dr. Michael Pillsbury. Pillsbury was always causing agitation. He was brilliant. He was a tremendous leader in foreign policy, but he was always on the edge, always poking at people. And in the process, though, we knew a lot of these people better than we ever would have. It is those conversations that can produce the most breathtaking results. My message to the American people as well as to my colleagues in public service is simple. And it comes from my own habits that have benefited me precisely. Always learn from history, not merely from the facts, but from the stories, lives, and emotions that produce them. cultivate and understand an understanding of the principles and values that have come to shape our course through these events. Use those lessons to guide the future, and in committing to preserve the lessons of history, never fear stepping outside of your comfort zone when you have the opportunity to do the right thing. These steps do not guarantee success. Indeed, all of us, just as our predecessors, face a brave new world with real and shifting challenges. But we can steer our general path towards the greater good if we accept the dual responsibility of protecting a shared history and working hard with whomever extends a helping hand to build a better world through it. Our nation's fate and our human spirit depend on it, and I'm counting on all you young people who have such great abilities to continue the fight and, of course, to continue to learn and continue to prosper for the United States of America, because the United States of America is critical to the outcomes of world economies, to the outcome of world history, and to the outcome of the world's progress. This is the greatest nation in the world. I've been all over the world a number of times. I've met with almost every major leader in the world in the last 42 years. I've been in very dangerous situations. I've been in others that were not only not dangerous, but were very pleasant. Not many. But all I can say is this. Foreign policy is without question one of the most interesting aspects of being in the Senate. But it's not easy. A lot of people think it's just easy to just solve these problems. It's not easy, and it takes an awful lot of background and work and effort to be able to participate in the foreign policy issues of the day. Our country is the greatest country in the world. The world knows it. Whenever I've gone, wherever I've gone, they've rolled out the carpet because they realize that this country is a country that can do so much good for so many other countries, including those who disagree with us, who don't like us. A lot of that is because of young people like yourselves who get involved in foreign policy and really take the time to understand the intricacies of foreign policy. And believe you me, there are a lot of intricacies, and it takes an awful lot of effort to be able to understand how you deal with them. Having a few years on Capitol Hill is a good experience for you if you can. For those of you who are more senior, helping us to understand on Capitol Hill is a worthwhile endeavor, as dumb as some of the members of Congress seem to be. Let me just say that I believe in this country. I have seen it through thick or thin do the right thing. I've seen it provide leadership throughout the whole world. I've seen other nations just stand in awe at what our country means and what it stands for and what it does. And with good reason. This is the greatest country in the world. I don't want to see it diminish in any way, shape, or form, because the world needs you. The world needs our foreign policy. The world needs the United States of America. And to that extent, as long as I'm able, I'm going to do everything I can to keep the United States at the forefront throughout the world. God bless all of you. It's been great to be with you.